when you get knocked down, never stop getting up. Just keep getting up. Keep going. I like to tell people I am firmly committed to the inevitability of my own successes. Right? Like, I'm not going to fail. And the reason I'm not going to fail is because I won't quit until I win. Right? It's really just that simple. It doesn't mean that I won't be battered. It doesn't mean I won't be bruised. It doesn't mean that I might not wake up some days sort of like, I just wailing. But I'm going to keep coming. And for me, it's because I'm mission driven. I just think people deserve.
Hi, everyone. I'm Peter Barron.
And I'm Brendan Schneider.
And welcome to the Leadership Backstory. So, Brendan, I am super psyched for today's podcast. Our guest has done incredible things in the world of education, especially in higher ed. He's also like aficionado of 80s basketball. So, you know, if there are any like Larry Bird, Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson references that get worked into this, don't be surprised. But let me introduce Michael Sorrell, who's the president of Paul Quinn College. And he's just had an incredible career and can't be thrilled. We're just so thrilled to have you here. Michael, thank you for the time.
No, thank you, Peter. It's wonderful to be here. And Brendan, it's a pleasure to get to hang out with you as well.
Yeah. Well, and Brendan's got his basketball stories too, so maybe he'll throw a couple our way. But Michael, like the whole premise of this podcast is to really look back and understand, like, how did your career progress? And you've been a lawyer, you've worked in presidential administrations, you're president of a college, you were almost a president of an NBA basketball team. I mean, all these different things, and all of them have leadership components to it. Like, when you think about your journey, you know, where does that start for you? Like, where do you start to identify those leadership lessons?
No, it's a great question. And I would tell you, for me, I am who my mother and grandmother designed me to be. I grew up in this amazing family. My father was there. I had access to my maternal grandfather, just my uncles, aunts, right? I mean, it was pretty special. But my mother and my grandmother were very, very clear that they had what some might consider outsized expectations of me. And that they expected me to be someone who was a leader, a voice for the voiceless, that I would be unapologetic and strong. And so as I grew up with those expectations on me. Now, what was interesting about it was I was never a guy who felt he needed to be the class president or who felt as if he had to be the captain of his basketball team. I wasn't captain of my basketball team until I was in college, but I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that I was going to be a leader, that I was going to be someone who would spend the majority of his life leading. And that, I don't know whether this was arrogance, naivete, or however you want to frame it, but I just was never interested in beauty pageant leadership roles. So, which was a big reason why I didn't run for some things. And I certainly had some. Like, I was a vice president, I think, my freshman class in high school. I don't think I ran for class officer again after that. In college, I was secretary treasurer of the senior class. And I wish I could tell you that I had some burning policy motivation, but my campaign was born of attending commencement with one of my teammates who I liked, graduated from college. And I realized that they awarded the degrees in alphabetical order, which made perfect sense. But I realized my last name's an S. So I was going to have to sit there in the audience for hours until it was my turn. I wanted no part of that. So I identified that if you were a class officer in your senior class, you were you got your degrees first. There were 3 roles, and, I ran. I came in third. I really thought I had it. And then, a campaign slogan got me. One of the, one guy I'll never forget this slogan: vote for me or don't, right? Which I was appalled by. 'Cause I was like, anti-democratic buffoon. Okay,
Yeah,
he
I love
appealed
it.
to sort of this rebellious nature.
Yeah.
Then the next guy, I had sophisticated digital printouts. I had material, and I had my fraternity brothers doing my marketing. Right, they're handing things out. So,
You had an operation.
other guy,
Yeah.
his campaign slogan was support non-digitized indigenous labor, right? Vote for me. And so great lesson to learn, right? Like the counterculture got me, but I still wound up being on stage. And it turns out I had the best job because Secretary Treasurer, you don't do anything.
Yeah, I
Like
love
the
it.
senior officer has a job, he has to give some speeches, the vice president does some other stuff. Literally, I did nothing. So I was a senior class officer because I wanted to get my degree first. And there were some other things that I've done, but I just I understood also the importance of using your voice authentically.
Yeah.
And that was always very, very important to me. So
Yeah.
it sort of just started from this place where my family told me I was going to be a leader. I prepared myself, and I developed a very strong sense of justice of what I thought was right and what I thought was wrong, and I tried to adhere to that.
Oh, go ahead, Brendan. Yeah.
I was just going to say, sorry, Peter, this is intriguing to me. So you're talking about mom and grandma. Were there things that they did to help you with those expectations and leadership that you do today?
Oh, absolutely. So one of the funny parts was that for my birthdays, they would give me the poem If. For a huge chunk of my life, I would get a version of If that was age appropriate. So when I was a little guy, I got If for little boys. When I got older, it was If for teenagers. If for young men who should listen to their mother more, right? Like there was just, I don't know where they found these cards. I have never found them since. But If for my family was the pathway to becoming a virtuous man. And my mother was someone who really, I can't tell you I have this tremendous love of poetry, but I have a deep appreciation for it. And the classes I teach here, I make my students learn poems. And my students, if you take a class with me, you have to memorize it, right? Like you have to know it cold or else you won't pass. And it's because of the lessons that it teaches. But I learned those lessons from my mother and my grandmother. This idea that everyone matters, I learned that from my mother and my grandmother. My family, we owned a really successful restaurant business. That's what, afforded us this extraordinary life. But my mother ran a social work agency for the state of Illinois. And so it was this public-private partnership. And my mother's point was, money can never be your master. It must always be your friend, but it can never be your master. And you must always be someone who functions with compassion. And at each step along the way, I have tried to be someone who has functioned with compassion.
Now, and I'm sure those are lessons that you've taught people all throughout your career.
Oh, I hope.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You don't really know what you teach them until you see how they apply what you thought you taught them. Okay.
Right. Fair enough. Hey, what role did athletics play in building your leadership philosophy? Because I know that was important to you.
Yeah. So, athletics have played such a critical role in my life in so many different ways. My first love was baseball, and baseball taught me. So I got into baseball because my first cousin, the older of the two of them, played baseball, and he was a Little League All-Star as a catcher. And I thought that was cool, but I was just like, I'm going to be better, right? Because I may or may not have a competitive streak.
I was going to say.
We'll leave it at that. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, we'll just set that down there.
Yeah.
And, but what I realized was it's about the work.
Yeah.
If you work, you can accomplish extraordinary things. And, I teach that lesson to my son. And some people are naturals in whatever they do, but most people aren't. But you don't really realize who they were at the beginning because you don't see them at the beginning. You don't see them when they can't figure out up from down.
Right.
And so for me, what I've always tried to teach people, and sports have helped me with this, is this idea that if you are willing to work hard, you can accomplish amazing things. And the true test of a leader is, can you convince people to outperform their abilities?
Yeah.
And I played on some horrible teams, right? Like, just bad. Like my Little League baseball team, my second year, so we won 6 games when I was 11, 3 games when I was 12, right? I was a pitcher, and I was I never started a game where I didn't strike out everybody I faced at least one time, right? And I think, that we won 6 games, I went 3-1. The next year we won 3 games, I think I was 2-0, 3-0, right? Like, we weren't losing because of things I was doing, but what I learned and what I applied going forward was that it did me absolutely no good to be a dominant player on a bad team. That I still was losing. And so I took a different approach. I said, what if I'm still really good, but I convince my teammates that they're good too? And that I don't criticize, I build and encourage. And it didn't always work, right? I still went on to play on some really bad teams. But as I got better at it, as I learned how to motivate better, I noticed that it was tied to lifting others. And that is a skill set that I have tried to hold on to and use in my current role.
We got a lot to talk about when we get to your current role, but before we do, like, after you graduated from college and you went to law school, like, where did those lessons start to continue to refine themselves? Like, were there moments when you're practicing law, or I'm just really curious about that, because what were you, after you graduated law school, how old were you? Like mid-20s-ish?
So I went from undergrad directly into graduate school and got a master's in public policy.
Got it. Yeah.
So I finished public policy school at 23. I then worked for a year doing Community Reinvestment Act and economic development work in the state of North Carolina. Then I went back to law school. So I graduated law school at 27.
27.
And really, one of the most formative lessons in my life was public policy school. Because it was really, really hard. And it wasn't a comfortable choice for me. Part of the reason why I picked it was I needed to address the void of quantitative skills that I had. And I didn't want to spend my life being someone who ran away from being able to crunch the numbers and having to hire people. So, and this is part of my, absolutely my leadership philosophy now is the piper is always going to get paid. There will never be a time where you won't have to pay the piper. The price you pay early is so much less than the price you pay later. And so suck it up, take the hit early, and then, fix it for later. And that's, that's really what it is that I see, that I've tried to to master as I've gone along. And so public policy school taught me that, right? Then I spent that year traveling the state doing economic development work. And that taught me, I decided to go to law school because I idolized Thurgood Marshall and Charles Hamilton. And it was really, I thought the fight for justice was going to be fought in the courts. And it turns out it's fought on the economic front. And that, people can, if people can feed their families, then they can carve out the kind of lives for themselves. And as I moved forward in understanding that, then I really did change my leadership style, right? Like I understood that you have to be able to talk to people in plain English. You have to be able to listen. You have to be able to have empathy without being condescending. You have to be able to empower people. And those things didn't come from the law. They came from public policy. They came from that year of doing economic development work. The law was wonderful. It taught me how to think. But so much of how I lead now comes from walking the streets and the towns of North Carolina, looking into people's lives. And that's a lesson I've tried to maintain ever since then, is that I want to come to your turf. I want to come to where you live, sit in your home, walk the streets of your town. I'm unafraid to do that. I want to do it because I want to, show you respect and tell you that I'm comfortable doing things on your terms, right? It doesn't make me weak. Actually, I think it makes me stronger because once I show that I have the ability to navigate any environment, it makes me more trustworthy, and I think it makes me more effective. So the law was amazing. I loved my time at Duke Law. Wouldn't trade it for anything else in the world. But really that leadership component of, walking a mile in someone else's shoes, that came before I got to law school.
Did you have mentors during that time? Like, was there somebody who was helping you guide and shape that philosophy? Was it a professor? Was it somebody that you worked with? I'm curious.
So I have an interesting relationship with mentoring. I used to spend a lot of time being frustrated over a perceived lack of mentors. I also don't think I'm the easiest person in the world to mentor, right? And this is an area that I really try to be self-critical about. I have always had a very clear vision for where I want to go. And the path to doing that has sometimes left me failing to realize what opportunities might look like, right? Like, it's this combination of extreme confidence that I was going to be who I was going to be and I was going to get there and I could do it on my own terms, which didn't really avail me to people wanting to help me in the way that I saw them helping other people, which then reinforced this notion in my head that I had to figure it out for myself. But I also recognize that you do need mentors. So I began to implement what I like to call guerrilla mentoring, right? You've heard of guerrilla warfare. This is guerrilla mentoring. So I have had amazing mentors. If I call you, you answer the phone and you answer my question, you are mentoring, right? And if I send you an email and you respond to the email, answer my question, you are mentoring me. I don't need some formal relationship that becomes heavy and overwhelming to people. I actually think people make mistakes with that. I get lots of young professionals who will call me up and say, will you be my mentor? And I'm like, I don't even know you, right? Like, I don't even know you. You don't want a mentor. You just want the ability to say that I'm your mentor.
Man.
I think that's shallow.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm not going to do that to someone. I am going to ask questions. And so when I was in law school, actually public policy school, my mentor at Duke, first one was Fritz Mayer, who was one of my professors at the public policy school. He's now the dean of the public affairs school at Denver University. But I'll never forget this. I met a man named Jerome Culp, who was the first Black tenured professor at the law school at Duke. And I met him on the outdoor basketball court called the Bubble at Duke. And I was playing, and, you know, I may or may not have been a bit of a trash talker, right? You know.
Yeah.
But I'm playing, and Professor Culp was out there with his shirt off. And Professor Culp was, you know, he was a goodly sized man, right? Not the type of man that you would typically think would be playing skins. And definitely, you know, you might be a little bit surprised to see him out on the basketball. So I'm out, and, you know, I think I dunked on somebody and was talking trash to them. And, you know, someone pulled me aside and they said, hey, that's one of the professors at the law school. And I was going, that's not a professor at the law school. Professors at law school don't come out and pick up basketball in the outdoor court. Turns out he was a professor at the law school.
I love it.
And we began talking, and we built sort of this friendship on the court. And I took, in the spring of my first year, I think it was my first year. Yeah, it was my spring of my first year. I took my electives in the law school because I knew I wanted to go to law school. And I took his class, and, you know, his class was really interesting. And he and I hit it off. And so he asked me to house sit for him while he was he took a sabbatical for a semester. And he became the person that I would go to ask questions, to learn things. And I needed people who allowed me to just be me.
Right.
I wasn't mentoring for me. I didn't always have the most formed questions and opinions, right? Like, I needed people who kind of gave me space to sort of stream of consciousness a bit. And he did that. And so he was an amazing mentor to me. Micheline Mawson, who's my advisor in public policy school, my thesis advisor, she was my master's memo, that's what we called it. She was a mentor to me. So I did have mentors. I did have people who really poured into me. And as I've gotten older, I've just figured out how to convince more people to pour into me without ever knowing they were pouring into me.
Yeah. You know, Brendan, this reminds me of, we've had a couple of guests, Michael, who've come on and talked about having a personal board of directors. Like, just like, you know, maybe 8 to 10 people that are going to call you on your BS. They're going to encourage you. They're going to give you good advice. You can call them at any time of day, and they're going to be there for you. Is that kind of a way you might think about it?
So I do have some people like that, right? People who I can call and have been really, really good to. One of them is Ron Kirk, who was the first Black mayor in Dallas and was U.S. Trade Representative under President Barack Obama. He and his wife have been such great mentors. They introduced me to my wife, right? So, you know, that is mentoring done at an exceptionally high level.
Yeah, right. Super precise. Yeah.
Yes. That is, one could argue, I have hit the mother load on mentors with them.
Right.
But it is, I've been very, very fortunate to have people at certain periods in my life have filled that role. I don't necessarily know if I've had mentors for 40 years. My mentors tend to be in chunks of time, situational mentors.
Sure.
And maybe that's a product of me not knowing how to sustain relationships throughout. But I have been blessed to have people who were, you know, I will call angels in my midst. What I needed at that moment in time, they were there and provided.
I'm super curious about your time in the Clinton administration. What did that look like?
That was chaos, because I was doing the president's initiative on race while the Monica Lewinsky scandal was going on. So we wanted to talk about race while everyone else wanted to talk about sex. Right? But it was, first of all, let me say this. It was extraordinary, right? I mean, I'm just being a little tongue-in-cheek with the cast. It was extraordinary. President Clinton is one of the most brilliant people I've ever met in my entire life. His intellectual capacity exists on a level that few have the ability to achieve, right? just exceptional. Ironically, that experience came out of sort of a situational mentoring opportunity, because the first summer I ever spent in D.C., I worked with the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law. And they were, you know, this amazing entity. They were run by an Oberlin grad who gave me the internship when I was after my sophomore year of college. And the number 2 person in the office at that time wound up being my boss at Oberlin. I mean, my boss in the White House. She hired me. And it really, I mean, Washington, life at that level is very, very different. And I can't tell you that I fully understood everything, because I don't think you do. I think Washington's a place where you get a lot of young people who become intoxicated by the access that they have. They haven't really earned that access. I mean, if I'm honest with myself, at 30, 31 years old, did I earn being a special assistant to the executive director of a special program in the White House? No. Right? But what I did was really soak in the Washington experience, and the places where I disagreed with it, I went off, and when it's been my turn to lead, I've done it differently. But, you know, maybe if I could have played the game better, maybe things would look different, you know?
Was politics ever like something that you thought about?
Oh, I mean, everyone who knows me has thought that politics would be, elected office would be in my future, right? Like, I mean, growing up, I thought I'd be the mayor of a big city, because when you grow up in Chicago, there is no job that looks cooler than being the mayor of Chicago, right? It just doesn't. So I thought I'd be a big city mayor or a U.S. senator. I have, you know, twice been asked to run for, one time, honestly, been asked to run for governor of the state of Texas by the Democratic Party. The second time, they were like, you know, we'd still like for you to run.
Yeah.
I wouldn't call that, like, you know, the first time it was, sat me down to me and said, we want you to run, right? That almost got me, right? That almost got me. But, you know, my kids are 8 and 13, and I know what it's like to grow up with a father that was always working. I mean, I knew my dad loved me. I knew exactly where he was, but it didn't change the fact that he was always there. Here.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't want that with my kids, right? Like, I have these 2 amazing kids. I have an amazing wife. And I was, at times when people have tried to convince me to run for mayor of Dallas, sometimes I get appointed to these citywide commissions and things like that. The last time I was appointed to one, my son was, I can't remember exactly how old he was, but he was already playing basketball. And I tried, like, my dad came to 2 high school games.
Yeah.
He never saw me play in college. And I just decided that's not going to be how I do this with my son. So I go to all his games. I, you know, typically might even wind up being the general manager for his team and things like that. Right? So it's a mayor's bond. It's like the mayor's commission on the bond issuance, right? And I'm the chair. And we're having these meetings at night during the week. And there are people on that committee who they really wanted to be elected officials. So they were like, any opportunity they could take to get in front of potential voters, they were going to do it. Which meant that one Saturday, they wanted to have a series of all-day hearings that for something that, guys, I promise you, we need to have all-day hearings. I am sitting there. My son's game is at 3:00. We're starting at 9. And by 12, I'm looking at my watch and I'm realizing I don't think I'm going to make my son's game. By the time we got done at 5, my political career was over. Right? Right. I realized that there was never going to be another time that I was going to sit and pick this over being able to show up for my family. Right. So there may be public service in my life. I'm not sure what I do now isn't my public service, but maybe there'll be a traditional form of it, but it will take place after my children are off in college.
Let's talk about what you do now. So you've been at Paul Quinn for how many? It's been, what, 12, 13, 14 years?
Oh, no. Why are you trying to short me? You're like, we're friends. Like,
I'm not good at math.
So I've been president for 16 and a half years. This is my 17th fall in this job. Wow. And it's I love it, right? It is a gift. It is a blessing. It is an honor to serve in this capacity. But it is hard. It is hard because people show you a lot in these roles. And, you know, once people realize that you genuinely care, they ask a lot of you in these roles. And that's tough.
So I'm guessing then you arrived on campus in 2007, right? Is that right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm redeeming my math abilities. What did you find?
Gold star for you, Peter.
Gold star. Yeah. Tell my kids. What were the circumstances? Like, what were the challenges that were in front of you when you got to campus?
So when I became president of Paul Quinn, first of all, I got the job because everyone else turned them down. Right. I was the last choice. And I know this because at the time I was on the board and I saw all the people that turned them down before they realized, hey, maybe we should see if Michael wants to do this. And, we had 30 days of cash on hand. Boston Consulting Group told us that we had 18 months to 24 months left before we'd have to close our doors permanently. We had 15, 16 abandoned buildings on campus. The entire front of the campus was abandoned buildings. Everyone hated us because we had betrayed people's hope. Hope is a precious commodity. Yeah. And those who are resource challenged, hope becomes something very, very dear to them. And they don't do well when you don't live up to that. We were a failing institution, and everything had to be remade. And I spent 4 years, really working to stabilize the institution, but also to candidly to get people to believe what was possible, that this was possible. And we got there. It was hard. This has been the hardest job I've ever had because failure was absolutely possible. And more days it was probable than just possible. And a couple of things I've learned through this, I've learned so much through this process, but a couple of things really stand out. Number one is when you get knocked down, never stop getting up. Just keep getting up, keep going. I I like to tell people I am firmly committed to the inevitability of my own success, right? Like I'm not going to fail. And the reason I'm not going to fail is because I won't quit until I win, right? It's really just that simple. It doesn't mean that I won't be battered. It doesn't mean I won't be bruised. It doesn't mean that I might not wake up some days sort of like, I just got waylaid. But I'm going to keep coming. And for me, it's because I'm mission driven. I just think people deserve better. And the hardships I endure, the tough times I may get in this position, they're nothing like what the families, many of the families who send us their children are enduring. That's, you don't have enough food to eat. Your family makes maybe $40,000 a year. You don't know. Like your life is defined by scarcity. And am I really going to complain because things are tough sometimes here? They're not that kind of tough. So it's about perspective. And then it's about teaching people how to believe that it's okay to sacrifice battles to win wars. We will lose a few battles here in the effort to never lose the war. And that's how I look at it.
I keep thinking about what you talked about earlier when you're on some teams when you were a kid and they weren't doing well, and you changed your perspective around like building people up versus tearing them down. Like, I can't think of a better opportunity to do that when you got to a school that had 30 days of cash on hand. I mean, how did you give people hope, like, and give them confidence?
Well, it's funny because you don't have a lot of time when you're in that level of crisis.
Right.
So some of the things that you might normally do, you just don't have time to do. And so I remember some of the stuff I remember telling people, I would never say to people now, right? Like just never. But we did not have a track record of success. So when people were doubting me, sometimes I just had to say, look, I win. This is what I do. I'm a winner. Winners find ways to win. Losers find ways to lose. We're going to win. And if you don't know how to win, that's okay. I'm going to teach you how to win. And I just would keep going. Now, when I have more time and Katie's not trying to, bar the door, I use a different approach, right? Like I tell people, listen, tell me your dream. Tell me your dream. Tell me why it's your dream. Now let's talk about how we can achieve your dream together. We're going to have to work hard. We're going to have to catch some luck. But people who believe typically have enormous amounts of luck, right? But what I really tried to do was just at every turn tell people we were going to win, and that it was inevitable. We were going to win. And I suffered something called a sudden cardiac death 18 months into this job. So I had a cardiac arrest. I died. I had to be resuscitated.
Oh, geez.
I don't know if you guys are Marvel comic fans, but have you seen the movie Iron Man?
Sure.
You know when Tony Stark wakes up in the cave with all the wires coming out of his chest?
Yeah.
So I was Tony Stark, right? Like I wake up and almost everyone I know that loves me is looking down at me. And listen, guys, when you wake up and all your friends and family are looking down at you, something went wrong. Okay. You might not know what it is at that moment, but I'm here to tell you something went wrong.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. My girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, who was the person who saved my life, right? Which, by the way, that's another sign from the Lord, right? Like, saved my life. God, I don't know everything.
Yeah.
But I know this, right? When you married me. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
So she, I asked her, I said, listen, what happened? She said, well, you had a cardiac episode. And I'm looking at her, I was like, I had a heart attack? And she said, no. Your heart's healthy, it's strong, it's fine. You had a cardiac episode. And I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? Right? And why am I here? Okay. And so she lays it out for me. And I'm looking around. My sister is sitting there. And my sister's kind of like, and my sister, look, you got to understand our sibling relationship. My sister's, I can hear her whispering to people, she might be brain dead. So we just, when people have these kind of injuries, they lose oxygen. We have to be prepared for him not being the Mike that we knew. And I was like, that is my sister, right? Like, right there. This is the state of our sibling relationship. My sister wants to declare me mentally incapacitated. So they explained it to me. And at that moment, I realized that we were going to win Paul Quinn. Because, literally, I knew. Because if we weren't going to win, there was no reason for me to live. The Lord doesn't save you to humiliate you. I had a 2% chance of living. What happens to me when it happens to people outside of hospitals, they don't live.
Right.
What had to go right? Let me just draw this for you. I'm at home in bed with my girlfriend. It's, I don't know, maybe 5 o'clock in the morning, whatever it is. And I start having seizures. Unbeknownst to me, when she was 16, she was a lifeguard. She learned CPR. She called 911, administered CPR. I had already flatlined when the paramedics got there. The paramedics shocked my heart with a defibrillator several times to bring me back to life.
Wow.
I get to the hospital and, I'm sedated and they run all the tests. I live. I have no brain damage. The girlfriend that I have, who we've never talked about her being a lifeguard, I had no idea that she knew CPR. The day before, I was in Washington, D.C. in a hotel room.
Oh, wow.
I would have been dead.
You've been dead.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? So,
yeah.
When the amount of things that had to go right for me to even have this shot at my life,
right?
When you live through things like that, right,
Yeah.
you begin to see the bigger picture. Wow. And I would like to think that I see the bigger picture. I'm grateful for it all, but I don't take any of it for granted. And it absolutely has impacted my leadership skill, right? Because when I talk about the inevitability of success, I've lived that moment to earn that. Early in my life, I may have believed that I was going to be successful. I believed I was going to win, but that was just, youthful arrogance in some respect, right? I hadn't earned necessarily the right to believe that, but I've always had this sense of it.
What did winning look like for Paul Quinn?
Well, I think we're winning now. It's changing. See, I didn't come to Paul Quinn because I thought my life work would be transforming a struggling institution in the struggling part of the city of Dallas.
Yeah.
I came because I didn't think higher education functioned well for the people who need it the most. Paul Quinn is how we're remaking higher education and challenging people and institutions to be more and to be better. And so here, we created our own version of higher education, the urban work college model. You come to Paul Quinn, you get a job, right? You get a job. People, I went to Oberlin for undergrad, amazing place, one of the most liberal arts of the liberal arts colleges, right? Liberal arts colleges tell you, lifelong learning. Listen, guys, I am here for lifelong learning, but what do you want me to tell the 75% of my families that are Pell Grant families that the reason you're coming to college is because you're going to be lifelong learners. What?
Right.
Oh,
Right.
people want to be lifelong earners. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're going to get rid of the L and we're going to talk to people in the language that they want to speak. And that's what we do at Paul Quinn. We fight the fights that need to be fought for the people who need soldiers. We fight in a way that is accessible, that is unapologetic. I tell people, this could be the only college presidency that I ever had. And I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Right? I don't lead Paul Quinn with an eye on how will this affect my ability to get another job. Because if you lead looking or trying to protect your job prospects for your next job, then you aren't being an effective leader for the people who need you the most now. I don't think that's right.
Yeah. Michael, I know you've been so generous with your time, and like we've always liked to wrap up our podcast with this question. So we just walked your path, from being a little kid all the way to today. If you had a chance to, hit reset, do it all over again, would you walk the same path or would you take a different one?
So, I've watched enough Marvel movies where I know if you mess with time messes with you. From the end game. Okay?
That's right.
So I'm hesitant to start messing with things because I have this extraordinary family and I don't want any other children or any other wife than what I have right now. If I can tweak some things, still wind up with the family that I have, I would tweak a couple things. Right? First of all, I would wear my hair any way I wanted to wear it. Right? Nothing my parents could say to me would affect me because I would realize I wasn't going to have it long. Right?
Yeah, I gotcha.
So there would be some stuff happening up here that would just be a freedom of expression. But on a more serious note, I would really treat school a little bit different. I was a good student, but I wasn't necessarily a spectacular student. I thought the most important lessons I could learn were happening outside the classroom and my ability to build relationships and learn how to listen and learn how to provide people with the things that they need. So there were times where I was satisfied with B pluses where I should have had A's. And I would go back and make those A's because they're not mutually exclusive. I could have done. So I might tweak that a little bit. A popular one would be maybe I pick a different college, but the reality of it is going to Oberlin and being in an environment where I was forced to create the things that I wanted to make me happy was a gift. It was an absolute gift. I mean, and I didn't necessarily think going to school in the middle of rural Ohio was a gift. So that's the part. Like Oberlin was wonderful. The people were wonderful. I loved them. I just didn't love where they were, right? Like I would have liked to have been someplace, maybe not in the middle of the farmland, right? But I would never have traded the education I got there, the spirit that I got there, the belief and the ability to understand that if you don't like something, you have the ability to change it. I want that gift from my children, right? I don't want them to be so comfortable that they never learn how to. There's this great phrase that you hear in the sports world, right? Especially in basketball, where people will say, I had to get it out of the mud, right? Look, y'all, my parents made a lot of money. I didn't get anything out of the mud. Okay, let's just be very, very clear. But Oberlin gave me the ability to understand what it looks like when you have to be the creator of your solution, right? In that respect, they taught me how to get it out of the mud. They gave me the resource, in, you know, an incredibly comfortable and wonderful environment, right? I mean, it wasn't like anyone was getting shot on the corners of Oakland, right? But so, I mean, as I look at it, I don't know what I'd change. Man, I do think that maybe I would learn how to be a better mentee, because I still don't think I do that well. Some of it is just it takes a lot of time. And there are only so many hours in a day.
Sure.
And I have a creative process that demands a certain amount of time. So I have to make decisions. And I still have so much more that I want to do. I don't want to live off of what I've already done. I don't think I've even taken my best stuff off the shelf yet. Right? Like I haven't even scratched the surface. I'm still warming up. So no, other than my hair, I probably just
That's good.
Terrific.
Final question, Michael. Where can people learn more about you? Where can they find out more about you?
No, they can come see us at Paul Quinn. But if you're not coming to see us, well, there are two things that you can do. This year, we have taken my son out of school and we're homeschooling him, and we're doing a year of man camp. And he and I each quarter are taking a major trip around the world and to teach him what life looks like as a Black man in this world. And so they can follow us on the Adventures of Man Camp, which will be on all of the different social media channels. If you get confused, you can just type in my name, and like I have no creative handles. I am like Michael Sorrell, right? Like that's it. But there will be the Adventures in Man Camp blog and that stuff, and eventually he and I will write a book. If you want to learn more about Paul Quinn, come to our website, which is paulquinn.edu. And that's, you know, I'll try and be interesting enough to merit people following.
Yeah. Michael Sorrell, thank you for taking us on your journey. And I'll just give you a plug. You're a great follow on Twitter. Like you're fantastic. So I highly encourage people to do that. Awesome. Well, thank you again. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Michael.
All right. You guys take care.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Leadership Backstory. Make sure to subscribe from your favorite podcast player and leave us a review if you like what you hear. We appreciate you sharing your feedback with other listeners. Peter Barron and Brendan Schneider host the Leadership Backstory. Catch you on the next episode.